Welcome to the video for chapter 12.4. We're going to do something different in these last remaining sections for chapter 12 versus what we did for the first three. So chapters 12.4, 12.5, and 12.6 are going to talk about specific individual viruses in each section. So 12.4, we're going to talk about a DNA virus called papillomavirus. This is of special interest to humans because it can do what some other viruses don't have the capability of doing, and that's cause cancer in humans. But before we dive into 12.4, let's do a quick review question. So the review question asks, the property of viruses that provides access to a host cell is what? A, binding of a virion to a specific host receptor protein. B, viral genome encoding of DNA polymerase. C, self-assembly of virions with the cytoplasm. D, viral use of an enzyme that lyses the host cell membrane. So take a second, pause the video, and see if you can't find the answer from 12.3. Hey, A is the correct answer. So the property of viruses that allow them access to a host cell is the fact that they can bind to specific host receptor proteins in order to trick the cell into bringing them in. Okay, so let's talk about papillomaviruses. So the objectives for 12.4 are to be able to describe the genome of papillomaviruses, and you'll be able to explain the infectious cycle of papillomavirus and explain how they can cause cancer. So to more fully understand human papillomaviruses, let's look at a specific case history. So in our case history, we have Sean. He's a 19-year-old college sophomore. Sean is going to visit the campus health center. Sean has a little problem and he's a little bit embarrassed about where this problem is. So when he gets to the health center, he's called back to visit with the nurse practitioner. And it takes him a second to get over his embarrassment and tell the practitioner what is going on. So when he finally does, he relays to the practitioner that there is a raised spot on the shaft of his penis. Now, the spot's not causing him any discomfort, it's not hurting, but Sean knows it's not supposed to be there, so it's making him uncomfortable. He knows that it's abnormal. Okay, so the nurse practitioner is going to ask Sean a bunch of questions like, what's his level of sexual activity? Where has he been lately? Has he traveled? Okay, after getting answers to his questions, the NP is going to tell Sean that he has a good idea that what Sean has is human papillomavirus, or HPV. Okay, so HPV is the main cause of genital warts. Now, not all strains of HPV are going to cause genital warts. We do have some strains of HPV that are going to cause warts on the exterior of the skin. So like on the back of your hands and your feet, for example. But the type of HPV that Sean has is the one that is going to cause genital warts. Okay, his version of HPV is transmitted by direct skin contact, usually the kind that you see during sexual intercourse. So the NP is going to conduct a physical exam, and not only does he see the raised spot on Sean's penis, but he does discover that he has additional spots on his anus. Okay, so after he gets done with his physical exam, the nurse practitioner tells Sean that more likely than not, the warts are going to go away on their own if he maintains some healthy habits. Getting enough sleep, eating good meals, eating regularly, eating his vegetables, okay, and just doing everything he can to keep his immune system strong, okay, because his immune system should come in and take care of what he's seeing. Now, one of the things about HPV that's a little bit insidious is that you can be infected with HPV for years and never know because you won't see any symptoms. HPV can be dormant in human cells. Now, before we go to the next slide, I'm going to give you the general warning. This is medical microbiology. We are going to look at some male human anatomy on the next slide. So if you don't want to look at the infected penis, skip the next slide, close your eyes, and just listen, pause, do whatever you need to. But a lot of you are going to go into healthcare, so this is something that we need to get used to. So I'm going to give you about 3 seconds to prepare yourselves. So 3, 2, 1. Okay, so if we look here closely, you can see these dark raised spots on the shaft of the penis. This is the HPV. So the virus can affect the epidermal cell layer and can go down to the basal cell layer where it can lay dormant. The thing with HPV is it can integrate itself into the host genome. Okay, so what happens is these basal cells can turn into keratinocytes, which are what we see here on the penis. Okay, and when this happens, it activates virus replication. So it's going to start to make new virions. Okay, and then the cells are going to divide and release these HPV virions. Now the thing is, where HPV can integrate itself into the human genome, when it does this, it can affect gene expression. Okay, so these cells, these dark spots, are essentially cancerous cells because what it can do is it can turn the cell replication on so it doesn't turn off, so we get uncontrolled cell growth, which is the literal definition of cancer. Okay, and every time each cell replicates, it replicates the viral genome as well, so we get more and more cells that are infected with that virus. So let's talk about what this means for Sean. So Sean has now been diagnosed with HPV. Okay, so for Sean, it's a little bit too late. There's no cure. He's contracted the virus. He has it now. Okay, there's no treatments. There's no cures. So what's going to happen is because he's already contracted one strain of HPV, he's very likely that he can contract different strains and strains that can cause cancer of both the penis and the anus. Now, this HPV doesn't just affect male genitals, it can affect female genitals as well, so the vagina and lead to cervical cancer. Now, because he's been diagnosed with HPV, the nurse practitioner recommends that during sexual intercourse from now on, Sean needs to use condoms. Okay, but there's a problem here. Condoms only cover so much skin. Okay, so there are going to be areas of the skin that can transmit the HPV that the condom doesn't cover or doesn't protect. So he can still spread the virus to potential partners. Now, as I said, it's a little bit too late for Sean, but he does have a younger brother and a younger sister, and the nurse practitioner is going to recommend that they get the Gardasil HPV vaccine before they become sexually active so that they can stop the transmittance of this virus. So let's talk about some specifics about human papillomavirus, HPV. So 80% of adults in the United States are infected with HPV. Now, not all strains of HPV are going to lead to cancers, so they're not all linked to it, but there are several, I think mainly 4 prevalent strains that are linked to things like cervical cancer in women. Now, all strains are highly infectious. They spread very easily, but they have a specific tissue tropism. They are very restricted to the skin or mucous membranes in the genitals, so they really don't spread to other tissues. That being said, they are spread during sexual contact. This means oral contact as well is a way to spread it. So oral sex can lead to things like throat cancer. Okay, but other than that, it really stays in the skin and the mucous membranes of the genitals. Now, that being said, if it does cause cancer, the cancer tumors can metastasize, and then that can cause the cancer to spread to other parts of the body. But that is different than the tissues that the virus can infect. So how do we protect ourselves against HPV? Well, condoms, like in our case history, do offer partial protection. But what's even better is that we have a vaccine now that offers more protection than condoms can. So it's called Gardasil. Both male and females from ages 11 to 12 are highly recommended that they get this vaccine. Okay, so this vaccine protects against the 4 strains that are most closely linked to cervical cancer and anal cancers. But the thing is with the vaccine is it only works if you get it before you're exposed to the virus. Because once you are exposed to the virus, the vaccine cannot help you, right? We don't have any antivirals to treat it, and we have nothing that will cure it. Okay, so the vaccine will prevent it, but only if you get it before you have been exposed to it. Okay, so this is actually really important because the higher our vaccination levels, the lower the infectious levels, or the less that we're going to see it in the population. So let's talk real quick about the papillomavirus genome. It's a DNA genome. It's circular. It's double-stranded. It consists of about 8,000 base pairs. Um, the papillomavirus falls underneath our icosahedral viruses. Now, the papillomavirus genome codes for about 8 genes. Now, the thing is, the papillomavirus genome is really small comparatively to other genomes. And one of the reasons why is it has overlapping reading frames. Okay, so you know how the mRNA can be read via codons? What this means is that the genes are going to overlap each other so they take up much less space. So as we can see here, this E6 and E7 genes, they're going to kind of overlap a little bit. E1 and E2 are going to overlap a little bit. So this is what we call an overlapping reading frame. This is going to make it so that the genome can be more compact and it's smaller, so meaning it can be replicated more quickly. I would know about reading frames. There is a question on your homework about that and on the next exam. Okay, so let's talk about how this can cause cancer. Let's look at its replication cycle. Okay, so our diagram here is of an epithelial cell. Okay, one of the things about epithelial cells, they're what are going to make up your skin, they have lots and lots of receptors. Okay, so what's going to happen is the virus is going to come in and find a receptor that has a shape similar to the proteins it has on its outside. Okay, so the virus is going to bind to that receptor protein. It's going to get endocytosed by the host cell. Okay, so it's going to be brought in on an endosome. What's going to happen is it's going to break out of the endosome and it's going to release all of its pieces. Now it's going to get to the nuclear membrane. It's going to find a nuclear pore that it can come into. Okay, so it lost all these proteins, so it's now uncoated, which is why it can pass through the nuclear membrane. Okay, once it gets there, its genome is going to be able to be transcribed. Okay, we're going to make some RNA from the DNA, which is then going to go into the cytoplasm, right? We're going to make the mRNA. The mRNA is going to go out to the cytoplasm. It's going to be translated. We're going to make all those capsid proteins again. Those proteins are then going to go back into the nucleus where we have the replicated host genome. So the proteins are going to come together with the genome. It's going to make a new virion. The virions are going to leave the nuclear membrane. Okay, and then they're going to be shed through the membrane of the epithelial cell, and this is going to release the virions to go infect other cells. Okay, so one of the things that is very interesting about papillomavirus is that your immune system can actually eliminate the virus when it's in this shedding stage. Okay, so if your immune system's good, you might not get cancer or even know that you have HPV because your immune system takes care of it first. Now, how do we go from being infected with HPV to having it cause cancer? Well, this all has to do with how it integrates into the viral genome, or sorry, how the viral genome integrates into the host genome. Okay, so that when they integrate, it can either disrupt genes or they can lead to the expression or increased expression of certain genes. Okay, because of how it integrates into the genome, it's very similar to that lysogenic cycle we talked about earlier in chapter 12. So let's talk about what happens when it changes the expression of certain genes. Now, with these genes, we're going to talk about the increased expression of the E6 and E7 viral oncogenes. So onco means cancer. So oncogenes means genes that cause cancer. So what happens is E6 and E7 are critical to cell replication. So when they are produced and turned on, this can lead to the cancer, or sorry, to the cells going through multiple cell replication cycles, making more and more cells, which then leads to cancer, which we literally classify as uncontrolled cell growth. Okay, so this is how papillomaviruses can cause cancer, is by using these E6 and E7 viral oncogenes. Okay, it's going to increase cell replication, which increases the number of cells, and uncontrolled cell growth is cancer. Okay, so that is all for 12.4. We'll see you in 12.5 where we talk about the flu virus.